The black waitress had spent years working double shifts at a roadside diner, earning barely enough to keep the lights on. But kindness was her religion in a world that gave her none. So when she spotted a fragile boy in a wheelchair shivering alone in the freezing rain, she didn't hesitate to bring him inside, dry him off, and share her own meal with him. What she didn't know was that across the street, watching from behind the tinted windows of a Rolls-Royce, sat one of the wealthiest men in America, the boy's father, and her simple act of compassion was about to shatter both their worlds forever. The rain hammered against the cracked pavement of Highway 16, turning the faded parking lot of Sunset Diner into a glistening nightmare. Zora Williams wiped sweat from her forehead, her dark skin glistening under the harsh fluorescent lights. 16 hours into a double shift, her feet screamed in cheap sneakers, her back a battlefield of knots and tension. At 32, her hands already showed the weathered lines of someone who'd worked twice that long. "Last table," she muttered, glancing at the clock. 11:50 p.m. That's when she saw him through the streaky windows. Small figure, wheelchair, alone, rain pouring over him like punishment. Without thinking, Zora dropped her rag and pushed through the diner's doors. "Hey, kid!" she called, jogging across the wet pavement. "What are you doing out here?" The boy's head snapped up, startled. His face was pale against dark, wet hair, expensive clothes soaked through, thin fingers white-knuckled on his wheelchair arms. "I'm waiting for my dad," he said, voice barely audible above the rain. He said just a few minutes. Zora scanned the empty parking lot. Nothing except a sleek black Rolls-Royce idling across the street, windows dark as midnight. "How long have you been sitting here?" She was already unlocking his wheelchair brakes. "Not sure. Maybe an hour?" He shivered violently. He had an emergency call. Zora's jaw tightened. Emergency call. Right. "I'm Zora. What's your name?" "Marcus." "Well, Marcus, you're coming inside before you catch pneumonia. Your daddy can find you there." She wheeled him through the diner doors, the bell jangling sharply. The warmth hit them immediately, carrying the scent of burnt coffee and grilled onions. "Earl," she called to the aging cook. "Got a towel back there?" Earl peered through the service window, eyebrows rising at the soaked boy. "Christ, who leaves a kid out in this?" He tossed over a clean dish towel. "Rich folks," Zora muttered, draping the towel around Marcus's shoulders. She parked him by the radiator, crouching to look him in the eyes. "When's the last time you ate something?" Marcus hesitated. "Breakfast, I think." Zora nodded, already moving toward the kitchen. She slipped behind the counter, ignoring Earl's curious look as she made a grilled cheese sandwich. Golden bread, butter-crisped edges, cheese melting in thick ribbons. She added a bowl of tomato soup, still hot from the afternoon service. She set the food in front of Marcus, tucking a napkin into his collar. "This one's on me," she said, waving away his protest. "Go on now." Marcus took a cautious bite. His eyes widened. "This is amazing," he whispered, taking another bigger bite. Zora smiled, warmth spreading through her chest. Nobody should go hungry, especially not a child. She didn't notice the sharp-eyed woman who entered the diner, the bell announcing her presence. Sleek bob, designer clothes despite the casual attempt at dressing down. She watched them for a moment, calculation in every line of her body. "Marcus?" The woman's voice cut through the quiet diner. "Time to go." The boy tensed mid-bite. Zora straightened, protective instinct flaring. "And you are?" Zora asked, not bothering to hide her suspicion. "Diana Wells, Mr. Harrison's personal assistant." Her smile was professional, empty. "Thank you for your assistance. We'll take it from here." Zora turned to Marcus. "This who you're waiting for?" Marcus nodded, but his fingers tightened around the sandwich. "Dad probably got busy again." Something in his defeated tone made Zora's heart squeeze, the resignation of a child used to disappointment. "Hold up," Zora said, wrapping a chocolate chip cookie in wax paper. She slipped it into Marcus's pocket. For later. As Diana wheeled Marcus toward the door, she turned back to give Zora a long, measuring look. Not gratitude, assessment. Through the rain-streaked windows, Zora watched as Marcus was loaded into the Rolls-Royce. A tall figure emerged briefly, tailored suit, commanding presence, face sharp as a razor blade. He didn't look toward the diner, didn't acknowledge the woman who'd just fed his son. "Victor Harrison," Earl whispered, appearing beside her. Tech guy, worth billions. Zora knew the name. Harrison Enterprises. The man owned half the city, including the building where her sister rented an overpriced apartment. 2 days later, Zora trudged up 4 flights to her apartment. The elevator had been broken for months. The landlord wouldn't fix it. Too expensive, though he'd raised her rent twice this year. She fumbled with her keys, shoulders aching, feet throbbing. The hall light flickered ominously. 3rd time this week. A knock froze her in place. Nobody came to her door at midnight. Through the peephole, she saw a tall man in an expensive suit that screamed money louder than words ever could. Victor Harrison himself. "Who is it?" she called, heart pounding. "Victor Harrison, I'd like to speak with you, Miss Williams." Her breath caught. "How'd you find my address?" "Does it matter?" "Yeah, actually. Creepy as hell." She opened the door a crack, chain still in place. "What do you want?" Harrison's face was all angles and sharp edges, gray eyes calculating. "You helped my son." It wasn't a question. Zora crossed her arms. "And?" "I'd like to know why." The question threw her. "Because he was sitting in the rain, alone, cold, hungry." She stared at him. "The real question is, why wasn't his father there?" Something flickered across Harrison's face, something almost human, before vanishing. "I want to repay you." He reached into his jacket, producing an envelope. Zora didn't take it. "Not interested in your guilt money." "It's not money." His voice remained controlled. "It's a job offer." "A job?" She almost laughed. "You want the waitress who fed your abandoned kid to work for you?" "Yes." No hesitation. Harrison Enterprises, executive assistant position, 6 figures, benefits, starting immediately. Zora stared at him, waiting for the punchline. "You serious?" "I rarely joke, Ms. Williams." "Why me? You've got college graduates begging to work for you." Harrison's eyes locked with hers. "Because you saw my son as a person, not an inconvenience. That's rare in my world." The words hit something raw in Zora's chest. "And what exactly would I be doing? Serving coffee?" "You'd be working directly with me, handling clients, negotiations, public relations." His gaze narrowed slightly. "You're good with people. I need that." Zora laughed bitterly. "You have an entire company full of people." "I don't trust them." The blunt honesty caught her off guard. Silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words. Finally, Zora took the envelope, not opening it. "I'll think about it." Harrison nodded once, already turning to leave. At the stairs, he paused. "My son hasn't stopped talking about you," he said without looking back. "That's the most he's said to me in months." Zora watched him disappear down the stairwell, the envelope heavy in her hand. She didn't need to think about it. She would say yes. Because for the first time in years, someone had actually seen her value beyond her uniform, and that was worth more than any salary he could offer. The headquarters of Harrison Enterprises looked like it was built from pure money, all gleaming glass and polished marble that screamed power and privilege. Zora stood in the soaring lobby, clutching her second-hand purse, feeling every eye turn to stare at her. Not curiosity, judgment. She'd bought a new outfit for today, the best she could afford from the clearance rack at Target, a navy blazer and black pants that already felt like a costume. She took a deep breath and approached the reception desk. "Zora Williams, I'm here to see Mr. Harrison." The blonde receptionist's perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose slightly. "Do you have an appointment?" "I'm his new executive assistant." The words felt foreign on her tongue. The receptionist's smile tightened. "One moment." 5 minutes later, Diana Wells appeared, tablet in hand, expression unreadable. "Ms. Williams, follow me." The elevator ride to the 50th floor was silent, tension crackling between them. Diana hadn't bothered with small talk, just silent assessment. "Word of advice," Diana finally said as the doors opened. "Don't mistake opportunity for charity." Zora's eyes narrowed. "Word of advice. Don't mistake silence for weakness." Diana's lips twitched, almost impressed. Victor's office was exactly what Zora had expected. Intimidating, expansive, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. A desk that looked more like an art piece than a functional workspace. He didn't look up when she entered, just gestured toward the chair across from him. "You're late." Zora checked her watch. "By 3 minutes?" "That's 3 minutes I don't get back." She bit back a sharp response. Instead, she sat down, folding her hands in her lap. "Want me to leave?" Victor finally looked up, gray eyes assessing. "Is that how you handle criticism?" "That wasn't criticism. That was making a point." She met his gaze steadily. "So, are we going to work, or are you going to keep reminding me I don't belong here?" Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, before it vanished. "The Westfield contract," he said, sliding a folder across the desk. "They want to build a new tech campus in Brighton Heights." Zora skimmed the document, her stomach tightening. Brighton Heights, her neighborhood, where gentrification was already pushing out families who'd lived there for generations. "This would displace hundreds of people," she said quietly. Victor didn't blink. "It would create thousands of jobs." "Not for the people who live there now." "That's not my concern." Zora's fingers tightened on the folder. "Then what is your concern?" "Profit, growth, expansion." He leaned forward slightly. "That's business." "No," Zora said, meeting his gaze. "That's choosing not to see the full picture." Silence stretched between them, taut as a wire. The door opened before Victor could respond. Marcus wheeled himself in, face lighting up when he saw Zora. "You're really here," he exclaimed. "Dad said you were coming to work with him, but I didn't believe it." Zora's tension melted at the sight of him. "Hey, kiddo, how you doing?" "Better now that you're here. Dad never lets anyone fun work with him." Victor cleared his throat. "Marcus, we're in the middle of something." Marcus's smile dimmed slightly. "Sorry, I just wanted to say hi." "It's okay," Zora said quickly. "I was just getting my first assignment." She turned to Victor. "Which includes figuring out how to make this project work without destroying an entire community." Marcus looked between them, sensing the tension. "Are you going to help Dad not be so—" "Marcus," Victor's voice held a warning. "Focused on numbers all the time," the boy finished, undeterred. Zora couldn't help smiling. "I'm going to try." After Marcus left, Victor leaned back in his chair. "You have 2 weeks to come up with an alternative proposal for Westfield. If it meets profit projections, I'll consider it." "1 week," Zora countered, "and I'll need access to your development team." Victor's eyebrow rose slightly. "You're negotiating with me now?" "That's why you hired me, isn't it? To see things differently?" For the first time, Victor's expression shifted, not quite a smile, but something close to respect. "1 week," he agreed. "Don't disappoint me." Zora spent the next 7 days working harder than she ever had. She studied zoning laws, tax incentives, community impact assessments. She dragged Victor's development team to Brighton Heights, making them walk the streets, meet the people, see the community as more than just real estate. On day 7, she presented her alternative. A mixed-use development that preserved affordable housing, included a community center, and still met profit projections through tax incentives and strategic partnerships. Victor studied the proposal silently, expression unreadable. "This increases community goodwill," she explained, "which means less resistance, faster approvals, and better press." Victor finally looked up. "It's unconventional." "So was hiring a waitress as your executive assistant." The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Present it to Westfield tomorrow," he said. Zora's heart leaped. "You're serious? Don't make me repeat myself." She left his office lightheaded with triumph. In the hallway, Diana waited, arms crossed. "Impressive," she admitted reluctantly, "but don't get comfortable. Victor doesn't keep people around long." Zora smiled. "Thanks for the concern." Diana leaned closer. "It's not concern. It's warning. You don't know what you've stepped into." The words hung in the air between them, ominous as storm clouds, and Zora wondered for the first time if she'd made a terrible mistake. 3 months into her job at Harrison Enterprises, Zora had finally found her rhythm. The Westfield deal had been a triumph, praised in the business press as innovative and forward-thinking. Victor hadn't actually thanked her, but he'd stopped questioning her decisions. Progress. She'd settled into a new apartment, started saving money, even reconnected with her sister. Life was good. better than good, until it all came crashing down. Zora was returning from a client meeting when Diana intercepted her in the hallway, face tight with urgency. "Boardroom, now!" The executive boardroom was filled with men in expensive suits, their expressions ranging from smug to outright hostile. Victor sat at the head of the table, his face carved from stone. On the table lay a printout, a confidential financial report leaked to their biggest competitor. At the bottom of the email, Zora Williams' electronic signature. Her blood turned to ice. "This isn't mine." "It has your signature," said Philip Westfield, sneering from across the table. "The timestamp shows it was sent from your terminal." "I didn't do this," Zora said, voice steady despite her racing heart. "Someone set me up." Silence stretched across the room. 20 pairs of eyes watching her, judging her. The black woman who didn't belong, who was always going to fail. Victor hadn't spoken, hadn't moved, just watched her with those unreadable gray eyes. "Victor," she said, meeting his gaze directly, "you know me." Another pause, heavy as concrete. Then Victor stood, buttoning his suit jacket. "Meeting adjourned. Ms. Williams, my office." The boardroom emptied, leaving them alone. Victor's expression remained granite. "Tell me why I shouldn't fire you right now." Zora planted her hands on the table, leaning forward. "Because I'm not stupid enough to leave my signature on a leaked document. Because I've spent every waking hour proving myself in this company. Because someone wants me gone, and you should be asking why." Victor's jaw tightened. "You have 24 hours to prove your innocence. After that, you're done." Zora didn't sleep that night. She and Diana, who surprisingly took her side, combed through server logs, security footage, email chains. By morning, they had their answer. James Rothwell, senior VP, had accessed her computer during lunch breaks. The same James Rothwell who'd lost the Westfield project to her alternative proposal. When Zora and Diana presented their evidence to Victor, his face darkened with cold fury. "Get Rothwell in here, now." The confrontation was swift and brutal. Rothwell denied everything until Diana played the security footage. His face paled as he realized he was finished. "You let her ruin everything," he shouted at Victor. "Some waitress from nowhere. Our stock prices are tanking because of your charity case." Victor's voice was deadly quiet. "You're fired, James. Security will escort you out." After Rothwell was gone, Victor turned to Zora. "You should have come to me immediately." "Would you have believed me?" she challenged. Victor didn't answer. He didn't need to. They both knew. 1 year later, Zora Williams sat in her corner office as the newly appointed Vice President of Community Development. Under her leadership, Harrison Enterprises had launched programs for minority business loans, affordable housing initiatives, and scholarship funds. The door opened and Marcus wheeled himself in, now 15 and grinning. "Dad's looking for you. The foundation meeting starts in 10 minutes. The Harrison Williams Foundation had been Zora's idea, using corporate profits to invest in underserved communities. Not charity, investment. Victor was waiting in the conference room going over presentation notes. He looked up when she entered, his expression softening almost imperceptibly. "Ready?" he asked. Zora nodded, smoothing her designer suit, one she'd earned, not borrowed. "Always." As they prepared to present to community leaders, Victor leaned closer. "Marcus wants you to come to dinner tonight to celebrate his science fair win." Zora smiled. "Wouldn't miss it." She'd come to Harrison Enterprises to prove her worth. She'd stayed to make a difference. Because sometimes the most powerful act isn't just climbing the ladder, it's changing where the ladder leads. Like and subscribe to see more life-changing stories that show how kindness can transform lives. Was Zora right to take the job with Victor? Comment below with your thoughts on standing up for what's right, even in the most intimidating circumstances.